So, hello, welcome. So this is really kind of the inaugural episode of Make It Make Sense. So, I don't know about you, but my take on this life is like the older that I get, the more things I find that are perplexing to me. Just the way the world's changing, all of the things that are happening around us. And I think we as humans spend a lot of our time just trying to make sense of the world around us. And so, the whole idea behind this is just to have some organic conversation about different topics. And I'm so glad that you're here with me. So this is Emily. I've been practicing saying your last name.
Okay, let's hear it.
Satiaglu.
Sachi Aglu. Yes.
Oh, Sachi. Okay, so I knew that C was tricky in there.
Yep.
But hello, welcome. She's
Hello.
still Emily Kuhnfield in my phone, but tell us who you are. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I'm Emily Sachiaglu, formerly Emily Kuhnfield, as Lori knew me, and I am married to a man from Turkey, hence the crazy name. And we have one son, and I work as an administrator in an urban private high school. So I hang out with teenagers all day. That's fascinating.
Fascinating.
And yes. And I live in Kansas City, and that's about it.
I think there's more. You may
more.
or may not have a PhD.
I do have a PhD. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I do.
You are quite possibly one of the most learned friends that I have. So I always appreciate your point of view. And I think today's topic is going to be pretty interesting with you. I'm interested, I was interested with the research that I was doing, but to hear kind of your take on things because, we'll get into that. But like first, as a segue into it, I know you don't pay attention to like celebrity gossip and things like that. So for anyone who's watching, Emily has barely even had a television in her home. How long has it been now?
Well, no, we have one now.
I know since you've had one, how long has it been?
2 years. 2 years.
So just barely.
Just barely. Yeah.
Just barely. And I that should not be so shocking to me. More of us should not have TVs. I have multiple TVs in our home. And I just am kind of a homebody and I love TV, but I also kind of love celebrity gossip and things like that. So are you watching or paying attention to anything about this Jada Smith and Will Smith stuff that's happening?
I am not.
Okay. So you know Will Smith. I mean,
I do.
Okay. And Jada Pinkett Smith. And they have been always kind of revered, I think, in Hollywood for being this solid as solid can be example of marriage, right? Like
they've been together a long time.
And two people that were very much you would think were destined to be together and just had the best relationship, and they were the ones to watch and like hashtag goals, right?
Yes.
Well, evidently they have been separated for what she's coming out. She has a memoir coming out. So she and Britney Spears both have books that are have been published.
Those will be top of my list.
Yes, I know. Well, sadly, I ordered Britney's.
Okay.
I'm going in. I'm going in. So, but Jada, in like on her press tour, is talking a lot about her relationship and has admitted that she and Will have been separated for 7 years. And that, she
like secretly separated?
I guess secretly separated. She had an entanglement, like she had an affair with one of her son's friends and kept referring to it in dialogue as like an entanglement with this person, but it was like, I guess, a full-on relationship.
And how old is her son?
I don't know, probably 25 years younger. I'm not really sure. But just they were in the press a lot for that, and then they were at the Oscars, and Will Smith in defending her from a joke that Chris Rock
I saw that
right. And so in her press tour, she's talking about how during the Oscars they weren't even together. She didn't know, like, she hadn't been called his wife for a long time. She was very surprised by all of it. So I think it's kind of intriguing. Okay. It's always interesting to watch people in a fishbowl. And I think it's private stuff that really should probably be kept private, but those are choices that they made and people are interested now, right? So, but I think it's always interesting how marriages and these partnerships take place, and just marriage in our society today has really changed, right? So marriage has been on the decline. Like the number of people that are choosing to get married has been on the decline for the past 40 years.
Okay.
Which is pretty crazy. And if I were to say to you, or if I were to ask you the question, how many marriages do you think end in divorce? What would you say?
Well, I do think I know that statistic. So 6 out of 10, probably.
So I think most of us say 50%. Like that's
Yeah.
what we've heard our whole lives, right? It's actually lower than that. It's about 43% end in divorce. But I think when you couple that with the fact that less people are choosing to get married,
yeah,
it probably is a much higher total percentage of people who are unwed, right?
Yep.
So I don't know. I mean, you're married. How long have you been married now?
10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
So some of the things that they talk about in marriage, right? Like the 7-year itch. Did you feel a 7-year itch, like kind of a looking at your partner different and maybe a little bit bored of it all at 7 years?
I think not really boredom, but I struggle a lot with like being a mom and
Yeah.
somebody's wife, because the moment you become a mom, like your wife's silhouette changes drastically. And it's so
Yeah.
much of it is like, as a woman, it's a mental thing. It's probably not as profound to the husband, but for me, it was very profound. Like, how do I feel sexually? How do I feel about my body physically? How do I feel mentally? I've had a lot of conversations with women about my breasts, and that if you nurse a child and then you want to be in bed with your husband and him touching your breasts, it's a different experience. And I've never, that can make me sad. I've never gotten that back. It's never felt the same.
Like physically felt the same or emotionally felt the same?
Both.
Wow. Okay.
Physically, it doesn't feel the same, and emotionally, it doesn't. So I remember a girl telling me, "Oh no, that comes back. Like after you stop nursing and a year or two passes," but it never came back for me. And
Oh, that's interesting.
yeah,
I mean, I nursed for the better part of a decade
yeah,
between kids.
yes.
And I definitely remember a feeling of like, I'm just a vending machine. Like I'm like, you almost lose like your sense of being human at some point, but I mean, I would not change that for anything. I really, for me, nursing was a time that I still had that my child to myself, that I didn't have to share them with everybody else. I remember feeling that very strongly when I had my first child, because it was the new baby and everybody wanted a piece of him.
Yep.
I felt like it was the only time I could leave the room and go be alone with him and not have to share him. So I really kind of loved that experience.
I
But
get that.
I can totally see. And like when you're brand new, like when the baby's just here, the slightest friction will cause you to start leaking everywhere. So I mean, that's just not sexual at all, right? Like that's
No.
the worst. But yeah, I mean, I think that so you felt like your marriage was different. You felt different in your marriage when it was just the two of you.
Yeah, I continue to struggle with like my identity probably in my marriage. Like I want to be I want to be Emily pre-Jack, but I can't ever be Emily pre-Jack. So that like complicates my emotions in my marriage. Yeah, to be honest.
Got it. And I assume you've talked to Argan about it, right? Like you guys have this conversation.
We've had the conversation. I don't know that I think to him, it's like, oh, don't worry about that. I adore you. Like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But telling me to not worry about it doesn't mean it goes away.
Sure.
And then I don't ever feel like a man understands what only women can understand because they've been through that experience.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he can tell me it's okay, don't worry about it, but it doesn't change it.
Yeah. Now I would say he's a pretty involved dad. He seems like he's a really good dad. You're like understatement of the century.
That's an understatement. I would say that that's probably part of the complexity of the marriage, is that I have found myself saying to Argan, like, the husband and wife are first and the baby is second, because that's the way the marriage goes. I believe that the husband and wife have to be first and the baby. So I have said things to him like, and it sounds very juvenile, and sometimes he'll say it back to me like that, like, honey, you're the adult. But I'll be like, well, you shouldn't come in the door and smother him with kisses first. Like, you should come to me first. That is exactly what he should observe, and then you should go to him. But to Argan, it's one of those like, oh, don't be silly. Like,
So
come on.
where do you think, when do you think you developed that belief? Because I think for a lot of parents, I've heard it both ways. I think it's
Yeah.
very much the opposite, though. Like, a lot of mothers would say that they would lay down on train tracks for their child. And like, if they had to pick between their kid or their spouse, they would choose their child. So, but I've heard it the other way too, that like, eventually the kids grow up and leave. And
Yeah.
so you have to have the bond with your, so
Yes.
what do you think you always felt this way, that it should be the
I
marriage
think,
first?
well, I kind of learned that I learned that from my younger sister, Katie. Like, those were her exact words. She would say that all the time. Like, the marriage has to come first, then the children. And I believe very much in like modeling for my child. Like, if I want you to think or feel or understand something, I'm going to model that in front of you, and I'm going to be really intentional about what I say. So like, I constantly praise my husband to my son. Like, I'll be like, your father is so amazing. Your daddy works so hard to take care of us. Your daddy is doing what daddies do. Like, your dad, I always, there's a priest that I work with, and he's like, oh, Emily, you're maintaining the patriarch like so well, because it will be in a meeting or some Catholic thing, and it'll be like blah blah blah, and I always comes back to like my love and respect for Argan.
Does he do the same on the other side of
He's more, he's not as like,
overt?
yeah. I mean, I don't not feel that, but he doesn't verbalize it to the extent that I would. He doesn't like say it as much. But I think we kind of have this joke, but it's not a joke, but we'll say like, well, if we ever get divorced, like, I actually would let you have Jack, because I have more faith in your ability to like care for him than even my own, in the sense that like, I am a selfish person. I've always been a selfish person because of my childhood. So I've had this very like, I don't want to give people my time. I don't want to give people my energy, because I felt like the most important formative years of my life, I was acting as a mother, and that created this like tremendous resentment and selfishness in me that I acknowledge. And so, I could be very, I think, oh my God, if something happened to Argan, like, I stayed in bed till like 8:30 this morning. Argan got up, Argan made him breakfast, Argan got him dressed, Argan took him on a walk, like, and that's absolutely normal. And then I think like, oh, there I was just still laying in bed, because I just wanted to be alone. I wanted to be alone. I wanted to be by myself. I wanted to have quiet, and I wanted to rest. Does that
So
make
do you
sense?
think, yeah, for sure. And I think that we all need some of that, like, on occasion, so I have a group chat. You're in the same group chat with some
Yeah.
friends that one of them was talking about how she was home for the first time alone in 20
Yeah.
years. And I read the text like she was kind of lamenting, like she was sad about it.
That's how I did. Yeah.
I was like, that sounds glorious. Like,
Yes.
I kind of love it. I mean, but I mean, I have 3 kids, so it's myself and 3 kids. And
Yeah.
so like, I feel like there's always someone here, and we don't have the best boundaries. So they just bust into the room all the time. And, like, it's just, there's always someone there. So to me, it sounded glorious, but that's not everyone's story. And so I can respect that. But do you think, like, because of your upbringing, because of these, like the way that it all came about, you had a lot of siblings, so
Yes.
that should be said. There are seven siblings total, right?
Yes.
And then you're the eighth. So seven that were in the house together at one time or another, and
Yes.
then one from your father's second marriage.
Yes, correct.
So do you think because of your upbringing, like you chose to only have one child, or do you think it was
Absolutely.
absolutely. But do you
No, no hesitation.
or do you think it was also like a culmination of coming from a really huge house and seeing what like full family, seeing what that's like, plus having motherhood show up differently than it's romanticized to be? I don't
Yes.
know.
I think that, I mean, I did get married later and have my child later. So I was 35 when I got married, and then I had Jack when I was 38. And I made a lot of decisions in my life about like a marriage and a man and a relationship, because I always sort of observed my mom's discontent and unhappiness was grounded in the fact that like her identity, like what was it, or who was she, or what did she contribute, or what did she do? And so I always thought, well, I want to live a very selfish life for a very long time, and I want it to only be about me and me doing what I want, when I want, how I want, what I want. And then when I don't want that anymore, then I'll consider getting married. And I did not want that, and I had zero interest in it solidly till 30. Solidly till 30. I like top 10 things I would never have done is gotten married before 30. It didn't cross my mind. I didn't have any interest in it. I didn't want to have children. I was just wanting to have a good time.
Well, it seems like that's the norm now, though.
It
Like
is the norm. I think it's the
people are
norm.
having like taking that step much later,
Yep.
meaning they're having children. Like some of the research shows that because people are making all of these life choices so much later in life, or if at all,
Mhm.
that there are certain countries where the population is in danger, which
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how the population could ever be in danger, like the world's overpopulated, but you know, like for these civilizations to carry on,
Yeah.
there's a question because people are opting out. So maybe you were just ahead of the curve, but
Well, they
like,
don't, if you're the whiter and more educated and wealthier you are, the fewer children you have. So
and
like children are born in Africa and India and Asia all the time, but North America, Europe, like they're done. They're not having kids.
yeah, well, and it seems like same thing. If secondary education was a part of your journey, then those are the people that are having children later.
Yes.
Which I mean, I think is kind of interesting. I was really sort of surprised to learn that more people are choosing not to get married because of the expense that
Mm.
comes along with like a wedding and just like inflation in our world right now, that people are just like not doing it, when in the past people chose to get married for a sense of financial stability, because it
Yes.
is a hell of a lot easier. I mean, I run this household on my own. It was certainly simpler when there were two incomes, right?
Yeah.
So I think that was, when you think about people marrying for love and why they do it, and what we're told is the reason, that was very surprising to me, that actually finances and stability or lack thereof really are a large consideration.
Well, I mean, they had historically, it had to be because women had nothing for, well up to World War II. Like you didn't even have a job. You maybe went to high school, et cetera, et cetera. So what has it been in the last 50, 60, 70 years that women are more educated, working harder, contributing to the household? But I definitely would not have married a man that couldn't take care of me. Would not have happened. I was definitely, I mean, I lived in California and it was like, okay, these guys surf and work at the head shops. They're really hot and cute. I would never marry you because like, how are you going to take care of a family? Like that doesn't compute. I don't know how you would do that. So love, yes, for sure. But I wasn't going to marry somebody that couldn't, I mean, I'm in education. I'm not going to make millions of dollars. I do fine because I am higher up, but I mean, Oregon definitely makes more money than I. And I think that's the case with most men. they make more money than the woman.
Hmm.
Maybe not in your case,
Yeah.
but in the vast majority of cases, the men, it's like education is for example, education is a female dominated profession with low wages because the vast majority of people in education are women who have a secondary income with the husband. So they have been able to kind of stagnate those wages for so long because they knew women were the ones working in that industry.
Now, what about, because you were engaged before?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, you and you got out of it for whatever the reasons were,
Yeah.
but you had somewhat, it seems, bought into the whole like romanticizing of a partner and maybe or maybe not the family. But were you engaged before you were 30 the first time?
No, that would have been if I got married when I was 35, a little over 30, 32, something like that. 30,
Yeah.
32, right after. Because as soon as I left California, then I said, okay, I'm open to these options now.
Well, and moving back to the Midwest, I would say there's definitely a feeling in, I mean, in Kansas City is a great town, but it's a little more um Midwestern and just
Yep.
smaller. And,
Yep.
like I definitely like I can feel it now when I go back home coming from Dallas. I mean, it's like night and day, right? Like it's
Yep.
Kansas City's slower paced, and I really enjoy that about that town. However, I feel like there's a bit of a pressure to
Mm-hmm.
be married.
Yes.
I also feel like I mean, it's just it's an expectation. And also, if you find yourself dating, that's really complicated in that little town, it feels like, right? Did you feel that? Did you feel more pressure to get married?
Um, I definitely was in the state of like, uh, okay, it's time. I need to get going on this. And it just so happened that the person I became involved with, um, we spent 5 years together. It was probably the 5 worst years of my entire life.
In hindsight, you know that, but you didn't know
In
when you were.
hindsight, yeah. Well, in it, I probably knew it, but I didn't admit it. But I came home because my dad was diagnosed with cancer and my best friend had cancer. And then I started a PhD and he was in a residency. So it was like a recipe for disaster because those are the most stressful things you can go through in life,
Totally.
family dying of cancer, best friends dying, and then programs where it's like I would get up, I would teach, so you leave your house at 6:30, you're done at 4, then I would drive an hour to Lawrence at 5. I would go to a 3-hour doctoral level class. So you're in class from, 7 to 10. I would drive home and be home at 11. And I did that for years. I did that for 5 years. So it was like, I don't know how I did it. I mean, it was absolutely grueling. And then I was in an abusive relationship. So on top of all of that, it was like I was down laying on the ground and just being kicked in the head. So it was I'm surprised I made it out alive, but I think people can be very bonded by tragedy and trauma and pain,
Chaos.
suffering and chaos. Like we're in this together, and despite the madness of it, like that was the person who was by my side when I was going through all of that. So like I was crying to him. I was trying to make sense of cancer with him. I was trying to um all those kinds of things. So yeah,
Yeah.
you stick it
But
out.
then, I mean, the person that you actually ended up marrying
Yeah.
is the polar opposite
Polar.
of that person. So,
Yes.
and I would say, like, very much like the old adage is that you like marry someone who's like your father, or that
Yep.
like, girls look for people that are like their dad and vice versa. I think that he's kind of in a lot of ways like your dad. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Do you think were you cognizant of that? I guess you can probably see it now, but
I was very cognizant of it, especially because my dad, he would never be rude. So he would never have come right out and said, you know, uh, the first guy sucks and he's so bad. But, he would say things like, Well, I call those in my field red flags. You
Yeah.
know, those things are, and he was saying all the things to me that I couldn't hear, like, you know, despite my parents getting divorced, my dad was my mom's biggest fan. I mean, she walked on water, everything. He just supported anything and everything she did, everything, always. Like, she's the greatest cook, she's the greatest painter, she's the greatest dancer, she's the most beautiful woman in the world. And when, even after they got divorced and I was much older, I remember my dad saying, when we were married, I never, ever was envious of anybody else's marriage. I didn't think anybody had a better marriage than us. I didn't think anybody had a more beautiful wife than me. I didn't think anybody had more fun than your mom and I had. And he said here all along, like, she was unhappy, but I thought, everything was
Well,
great.
he was
So
truly in love. I
he
mean,
was truly in love. He was
yeah.
truly in love. So I did end up with a person very much like my father, and a person that, you know, it sounds obnoxious and it's not something to say, because people end up, I mean, I got lucky. It's a fucking gamble. It's a gamble. You're like rolling the dice, because you
Sure.
don't know. Well,
But
you don't
here,
know who a person will be as a father, because you've never had a
yeah,
child with him. So you enter into a marriage with him. You have no idea if he's actually the kind of guy that'll smack a kid upside his head if he pisses him off. You don't know those things.
sure.
Um, you don't know if they'll be financially responsible. You don't know if they're going to take out the trash. Like, you don't know those things. So Argan is kind of, he's an exceptional human. He's not a normal guy. The best way to describe him is he's like sort of more evolved than most. He's very evolved just in his thinking, his attitude, his understanding of everything. And even, I mean, he kind of had to like save my life. I was just entangled in this
Yeah.
madness, and nothing intimidated him. He just said, it's like, well, I'm here in this town, and I signed a contract, and everything I own is here, and I signed this lease, and I have this, I would just kind of lose my mind. And he would say, these are just problems. He said, most of them, if we throw a little money at them, they will go away. That's how he is. If you throw a little bit of money,
Pragmatic.
most of these will go away. Yeah, very pragmatic. He said, we'll just sort of deal with them one at a time. Okay, your first problem is that you signed a contract to work in a school. All right, let's find out how much it costs to break the $3,000. Okay, I'll give you $3,000. He just kind of went through these things one by one, and I just sort of followed along, kind of in awe of his competency and I mean, I think I married him at the time. I didn't make a mistake. I love my husband, but I think at the time I married him more because he believed in it so much that I couldn't not believe it. I mean, I kind of
Sure.
thought, why do you want to marry me? You don't even know me. And he was like, oh, no, I know you. I know you for your mind. I've spent 5 years intellectually with you. And what does a girl say to that? Like, oh, you mean I hadn't even slept with him? He's like,
So do you think there's something to this like sapiosexual idea
to
that
this what
you
kind of idea?
sapiosexual,
What
like
does
where
it mean?
you are not necessarily like heterosexual or bisexual, you're legitimately only attracted to someone because of their intellect and their mind, like
No,
regardless
I'm
of.
attracted to Argan. I mean, I wasn't going to marry a guy I wasn't also, I mean, sex is important to me. So that was there, but because it wasn't a normal dating situation. I mean, he was my advisor. So I had to, and that's another thing that probably is interesting about my marriage. Like, his identity, I had to change his identity. He was a person that had power over me.
He was an adult and you were like feeling like,
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, it's the class. He's the professor. I'm the student. He makes me feel bad. He shames me when I don't do my work. He wants to know what I'm, just constantly like an intense part of my life. But my dad, because he hated that other guy and he knew about Argan. I mean, Argan was in my whole family's life for 5 years, but only as a shadow. I mean, they didn't
Peripherally.
like know
Yeah.
him. Yeah, but they knew him. And my dad would say, like, you really should you belong with somebody a little bit more cosmopolitan. That was his word. He said, this other guy, like, he's like Joe Schmo. Like, you ought to think, and I'm like, Oregon, like, where do you get these? And I always kind of thought I would never marry a foreigner. I mean, I remember thinking like, oh, that seems weird. And my impression of him was that he was kind of snobbish. You know, I kind of thought that he probably, you know, Europeans can be like that. Ugh, Americans, they're so, you know,
Well,
so I sort of had this impression.
he doesn't like, and I've only met him a few
Yeah.
times. I think he seems very quiet, reserved. He
Mm,
doesn't feel like, I think in America, or maybe it's just the people that I know, we have a tendency to need to fill the silence and
yeah.
like talk, and we're always wanting to talk about ourselves and bring the conversation back. And I don't feel that with him. And I don't know if it's a European thing or if it's just like a sign of intellect, because they say that the smartest people are the ones that are observing and paying attention, right? And they're not speaking too much. But I don't know that I would classify him as snooty, but I think that whenever someone is different than what we are or what we're used to, the tendency is to find a reason to put
Yeah.
it down and say that it's not right. You
Yeah,
know?
and he's not snob. I mean, he doesn't have a snobby. That wouldn't be accurate. He doesn't have a bone like that in his body. You know, he's
Right.
very, you know, black t-shirt, tennis shoe, chill dude. You know, he's
Right.
very relaxed.
Now, and there's how much of an age difference is there between you two?
7 years, seven,
7 years,
8. Yeah.
which I mean, is not a lifetime. I mean, it
No.
like these numbers don't really matter when you become an adult, but I always think about when I was 12, they were born, or whatever, and then it makes a lot of difference. But it is a different generation and a different level of maturity that you must have been needing at that time. But do you feel that difference? Because that was quite a bit older for him to have not, he's never been married before, right?
No, never been married, never had kids. Well, you know, that, you know, he said things to me like that, like, you know, I'm 43. No, he 30, 35, 42. He was like 42, 43. And he said, well, I mean, if I wanted to be married, I could be married by now, but I wasn't going to just marry any girl. I was either going to marry the right girl or I wouldn't have gotten married at all. And even, you know, the story when he took me to meet his mom, we just like showed up on the doorstep. He did not tell her he had met me. He did not tell her he was bringing me. And he takes me there and then marries me 2 days later. He's like, hey, we came here, we're going to get married, and this is going to be your future daughter-in-law. And the way that she greeted me and treated me, and later kind of explained, you know, she said, well, he's my son, and I had no doubt that my son would ever do anything foolish. He was not going to, you know, marry the wrong girl. So as soon as she met me, she was like, oh, I love you, you're perfect because he picked you, so you must be. So
Oh,
that
that,
was a beautiful, you
yeah.
know, I was wrapped up in this, you know, everything kind of was happening like that. So I just became calmer and calmer and calmer and calmer. Because I think when he found me, I was like a tornado.
Yeah, sure.
But he took me like that. He was like, you're kind of a tornado, and I'm just gonna help you
You're a
relax.
project. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
you're a project.
clean it
You
up.
are, yeah, yeah. And I
Now,
mean, as women, you know, I think the saddest part to me about marriage these days, and I know what it's like to be on the other side, because that's how I was in the first one, wanting desperately for this man to marry me that was so fucked up in his head he probably was never going to do it anyway, but I couldn't admit that. But this whole idea of like, because I've heard it from a million girls. Well, I told him if he doesn't ask me in 6 months, if he doesn't ask me in 4 months, if he hasn't asked me by 5 months, we have to go and we're picking out the ring. I'm like, where's the romance in that? Where is do you really want to marry a guy that you're like harassing to marry you, or that you're giving ultimatums to, or that I mean, Argan did not get down on one knee and propose to me. He was like, I want to marry you. I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, I want to marry you. Do you want to get married? It was like a
well,
conversation.
I mean, I think I still feel that in a lot of instances that it's less about what comes after the wedding day and
Mm,
more about just the idea of that one
yeah.
fairy tale day.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Which
why have women been
is
sold that bag of shit?
yeah, I mean, like honestly, when you're a part of it, it just goes by in a whirl. You can't even really remember any of it because it's just so much activity and so much chaos in one day that it's not as if you're truly enjoying it. But I just think there is for a lot of people something about putting on the white dress and
Oh, yeah.
being walked to the altar and all of those things, which is not the right reason, clearly, to get married. However, I mean, we've seen it. There have been um, definite like relationships that, of people that we've known in our past that have gotten married, and you're like, I don't know. You can almost kind of judge or
Yeah.
guess if it's going to last or not.
Yeah.
I mean, even in our friend group, it's probably about the statistic is probably alive and well, the people that are
Yeah.
married versus divorced.
Right.
Um, and maybe we could have guessed it, maybe not, but getting married for the idea of it, I think is not uncommon.
No.
Um, so I wonder, because I know you don't watch like a lot of TV,
I
but
do watch some for sure.
there
Some, but
are a lot of shows kind of that almost, I would say, make a mockery
mm,
of marriage at this point. Like The Bachelor is very
mhm.
popular. That's, again, great entertainment, but not, are those people really being set up for success, right?
Right,
Love
right.
is Blind, The Ultimatum. So I mean, I think that there is this, just we have this curiosity. We want to watch people's relationships unfold in front of us, and for the right amount of money you can. But it's like, I don't even know if I feel like society takes marriage seriously anymore, because there's so much of this kind of stuff in our world. Do you get sucked into any of that? I don't watch The Bachelor, but it's probably the most popular, I would guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm very interested in other people's marriages. I don't know that I think about them. I do. There are people that I see them and I'll think, oh, they ended up with the right guy. They've got a good guy there. And I'll feel really happy for them about that. Like, I'm so glad. And then I feel very sad for people that didn't. Um, but for people that didn't or haven't, I want so much for them to go out and try again. I always want that because
Really?
yes, because I love being married. I love it's the easiest thing in my whole life to be married to Argan. It's easy. There's nothing complicated about it. I feel incredibly respected by him. He respects me. He appreciates me. He pulls his weight. He does his part. Um, and I just have a very deep respect for him because of his actions. Every single, you could tell Argan, like at 5 a.m., can you put this cup right there before you leave? And there will be no rhyme or reason to why. But if I ask him to do it, he'll just do it. He doesn't need, he's just dependable, reliable, all those kinds of things. And I think those are foundational things in a marriage. I think about, uh, like our friends Emily and Greg. I think they have a really cool marriage because Greg takes Emily exactly as she is, exactly as she is. He doesn't try to change her. He doesn't try to tell her what to do or how to do it. And he is an older man. He's a very serious man. He's a very reserved man. And Emily can be the life of the party. But there's something so beautiful about that. There's just something so beautiful about that. So, that makes me happy when I see things like that. I just think, okay, man, you lucked out. You got of the billions of people in this world, like somehow you found the right dude. That's amazing. That's
Well,
amazing.
do you think do you think there's only one right person out there for everyone?
No, I think statistically speaking, that's impossible. I mean,
Yeah.
if you think about all the men that you've loved in your life, I can think about all the men that I've loved in my life. And I think you and I are probably very similar in feeling like you have many dimensions.
Sure.
And so Argan is, if I think, okay, if I could have married any of the men that I had been with in my life, I did marry the right one for 99 reasons. But did I love sleeping on the beach in a tent with Tino and listening to reggae? Yes. Do I miss that deeply? Yes. Will Argan ever do that with me? No. So there's a part of me that's like, well, I could have had a completely different life. I could have stayed in California. I could have married this Rasta dude. We could have had these kids, and I might have been just as happy. I would have had a completely different life, but I probably would have been just as happy because he was like a really good human. And I'm sure you could say the same. I'm sure you could think of a guy and you could think, I imagine what our life would be like. And he spoke to that part of me as a woman. But can a man
Sure.
do every part? I don't know. If there's a
But do
one
you,
thing.
so, okay, so here's a question. So a couple questions. Number one, do you think monogamy is natural, like possible?
Mhm.
Do you think we're meant to be monogamous? I mean, like primates in general, I think only like the statistic was 26% of primates are monogamous.
Okay. Okay.
So there are some like things that would say that it's not natural. And I think that a lot of marriages end because of
Yeah.
lack of faithfulness,
hmm
fidelity.
hmm
So do you think it's natural? Do you think we're all just biding our time? I mean,
Um, that part makes me nervous
yeah.
because it probably goes back to Emily's own thing with like, okay, this man knew me as Emily and now I'm the mother. And so how does that affect our sexual relationship? Um, would I like to sleep with a different person again? Yeah. If I'm going to be perfectly honest, that would be kind of fun. Would I want to hurt Argan in the process? No. So it's probably what keeps me from doing something like that. Would that be fun? Yeah. Would I enjoy that? Probably. But would it be worth what it would do to my husband? No. Would it be worth how I would feel after I did something like that? No. But does that mean it's impossible? No. I mean, anything is possible. Um, you know, I think it is super challenging. I think a lot of people have affairs. I have friends that are married. I mean, I'm still at the safe point, but I've only been married 10 years. But I have friends that have confided in me about affairs that they've had, but they don't want to divorce their husbands. And they didn't carry on the affair, but I've had one that's had, couple and another that one time, so, and I mean, in their process, I was always like, because in two of the cases, they're married to good guys, the right guys, I'm always like, okay, do you want to, like, are you going to go live in an apartment and like go on a few dates and take, like, is that really the life that you want? Because let's see how it would play out. Um, I have a friend that does a lot of like emotional phone texting, sexting.
Mhm.
And part of me is like, oh, maybe I should discourage her from that. But at the same time, I kind of know the things her husband doesn't do. So I get why she does that. Um,
Does she say it to him? Like, is it communicated?
it is, but they have a kind of a complicated situation. I think we talked about it just like 2 days ago. She's like, well, he is a massive breadwinner and she gets to stay at home, and but they don't have much of a sex life, and so she has sort of this other place where she can kind of get some of that. And he I think the way she explains it to me, like, he feels like he's doing his husbandly duty because he brings home all this money.
Providing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, like, you're neglecting, her there. But I mean, sex changes a lot over marriage. I mean, I have another friend who's like, I told him he can have quality or quantity. And if he wants quantity, like, it's going to suck ass. And she said, if he wants quality, like, he's going to have to wait maybe 6 weeks until I'm in the mood again. And that's what she told her husband. Now it sounds a little harsh. I would never tell my husband something like that, but I got it. I got what she was saying.
Well, I have a hard time with that because I think if you're not like horny, you're not alive. Like if you don't want to have sex, like what,
Yeah.
like it's one of the things that makes life worth living. So
Yeah.
just to like all you hear this, like all these stories of these women that just don't want to do it anymore. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that is really challenging. I
Did
hope
you
that that
want to do it a lot throughout
I
your
mean,
marriage?
yes, like I was definitely the more um sexual of like the two, and it was a problem because I think if you're not having sex, there's more to it
Right.
because it is such an emotional connection, and if that stops, then you probably have to dig into why that
Why?
stopped,
Yeah.
you know, again, in research for this topic, since social media, there are a lot of people that are using that, and I think it might start as like a flirtation. You know, I tried to
Yeah.
explain to the people that I work with, like if you're a female and you have any kind of social media, you've definitely gotten a dick pic or like have been solicited on the internet. Like it's undoubted, it happens. I don't care if you weigh 700 pounds or if you're a, perfect 10 model. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Like it's all females because guys are just seem to always be ready to go
They're-
and they're going to shoot their shot. Right. And so it's pretty crazy, but there are, I think, a lot of people that start these things up now because of social media or the internet.
Yeah.
And it definitely, begs the question, is there like is emotional cheating worse or
Mhm.
physical cheating? Like if you were to be cheated on in one way or the other, and not that there's a preference, but would you have a preference? Like does one hurt less than the other?
I think the 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 physical would hurt less.
Yeah.
For
And I
me,
think
it
most
would.
women would say
Yeah.
that,
Because
right?
we're women. And like if Argan told some other woman that he adored her and she was beautiful, that would hurt. But if I was like, oh, he went down on this chick, I'd be like, okay, well, okay. I don't know. I
Yeah.
wouldn't, I don't think I would. But I listened to a podcast recently that I was telling you about with this divorce attorney, and he said, um, the most important thing you can do in a marriage for it to remain healthy sexually is never compare your sexual life to anybody else's. And he's funny. He says, if you are a man and you're married to a woman and you like to have your socks on and have sex on Tuesday at 4:30 every 3 months, and your wife is down with that and you're down with that, then your sex life is perfect. And if you need to have sex 6 days a week and then not do it for a year, and your wife is okay with that and the husband's okay, then your sex life is perfect. And I know that like having a child, Argan and I are like weekend lovers because we're both dog tired during the week. And the good thing with us is that we constantly are like in a sweet way, like apologizing to each other for being tired and reminding each other it's not about not wanting to be together, but it's like, but Saturday it's gonna happen, or
It's game
Friday night
on.
it's gonna happen, like game on. But I'm not gonna make you feel bad that on Thursday, like top 10 things that I want to do is that I want to go lay down and get in bed and all those kinds of
And
things.
that's your love language during the week. I mean,
Yeah,
I
and
get
it
like
works.
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I do think it's about whatever works for every couple. I mean, one of the worst things you could probably do is try to dice, and we all do it because we're like gluttons for punishment, but like try to dissect previous relationships and
Yeah.
compare to what they like. We're all better off not knowing any of the stuff really that happened in the past because
Yeah.
it just no good comes of it, but we just can't help ourselves from picking at that scab, like
Yeah. Yes. Well said.
it's just like it's the human condition. But so if Argan, if something happened and Argan weren't here tomorrow,
Yeah.
divorced or worse, divorced
Yeah.
or otherwise,
Yeah.
you would get married again, is what I get.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I did tell Argan, I mean, we have a very fun, he humors me. He's always like, now, if we got divorced, don't worry, I would absolutely take care of you. No problem. I
Nice.
would take care of you. And he's proven it. He's set our whole life up with the trust. He put everything, he showed me, he's like, everything is yours, everything belongs to you. And his dad did the same with his mom. I mean, took wonderful care of her, even though they were like Jada and Will. They were like divorced, but
Do you
not
think
divorced.
it's a Turkish thing? Like, do you think it's
To take care of your wife. Yes.
yes.
You have to
Yeah.
take care of your wife. Oh, yes. They're like, we don't trust anybody but our wives. We take care of our wives. They're
Interesting.
very, yeah,
Because I don't know that American men are that way.
yeah, I don't know if they are. I don't know if they are either, but I know that it would be very shameful if like people, if we split up and like he didn't take care of me, that would be
I mean, you
awful.
hear about American men like hiding money and like
Yeah.
having other families and stuff. So I'm not sure that I
Well, I
feel
don't
like,
want to assume they don't do stuff like that, but I think there's you have to take care of your,
well, there might be a percentage of the population and
yeah,
God bless them,
God
but
bless them.
I watch a lot of 48 hours and most of them are not acting like it. But anyway, so sorry, carry on. So
Okay. So I've also told Argan, I said, now, because I go out a lot without him, like at night, and he'll always be like, "Did you meet any dudes? Did they flirt with you?" I'm like, "Well, this guy did tell me he liked my hair, blah blah blah." It's kind of innocent, but I did tell him. I said, if I did my life over again and had a very like sort of whimsical life, I would have married a different man every decade, like very intentionally. When I turned 20, I would have been like, I'm going to marry my 20-year-old love because this dude is speaking to me, and I would have spent 10 years with him. And then when I was 30, I'd say it's over. I'm going to go find my 30-year-old guy. Because imagine, do you remember your 20-year-old self and your
I
30-year-old
thought I
self
didn't do all
and
of
your 40-year-old self? Like you have been a different woman every decade of your life.
for sure.
For sure. So I'm like, okay, I'm like Emily right now, 46. Like, who will I be when I'm 50? And your whole thing about making it make sense, and the older you get, that's the best part about getting older. Just like the perspective you have on life, the kind of calmness, the confidence, all of those things. I
Or
don't know.
the
They all
just,
come with
I
that.
don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, just the stuff that you worried about when you were younger that just,
Oh,
it doesn't matter. And
doesn't.
at a middle age, you understand it differently. You're like,
Yeah.
why did I care? That wasn't
Yeah.
the end of the world,
Yeah.
like, so yeah, I mean, yes, I think as you evolve to be able to be with the person that made sense at that point. But that kind of begs the question for all those people that got married and they to their high school sweetheart.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell? I mean, like I am 100% not the person that I was at 17.
No.
And there are people that, I mean, we grew up and we went to Catholic schools, and so it
Yeah.
was very frowned upon to get divorced, and it was very much you are entering into a contract for life,
For life. Yeah.
and that's kind of terrifying, which might be why 20% I think was the number of most engagements are 18 months, 12 to 18 months,
Okay.
and 20% of weddings are called off after engagement, and maybe that's why, because
20%?
20%. And maybe it's because, and again, it's the internet, so like you could pull up some other site and find a different number, but it's
Yeah.
like the for life thing, I think
Yeah.
is really scary. But
Mhm.
I mean, I have to think that those people that got involved when they're really young, and if they've evolved and if they've done it together, that's beautiful. But that's also not always the norm. Like
Yeah,
usually
you can
you're
go.
kind of on diverging paths, right?
Right.
So they've just decided they're going to power through. And I think there's something awesome about that too. But it's just, it's so intriguing.
I don't know if I think there's anything awesome about that. If 10 years of your life pass and you're like, oh my God, I was miserable for 10 years, but we had 10 great years, when we raised the kids. I'm like, but you gave up 10 years? No. I used to be very anti-divorce. I just thought, oh my God, the children and everything that happens. But no, I've completely changed my viewpoint on that, because once there's a famous, I don't know if it's from a poem, the only thing you can't do for someone you once loved is love them again. Like once you don't love somebody, you don't love them.
You
That
can't
is
re-love
gone.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not in that way. You can respect them, or you can do this or do that. But, I think adults often forget, once they start hating each other, the kids they're not dumb. They're not fools. Like if you have hostility and anger towards your husband, your child will feel that. If you
Sure.
do respect your wife and you think she's a fucking idiot, your children will feel that.
Sure.
So you have a duty to get divorced. You have a duty to get divorced because you cannot do that to young children, and you should not do that to another person's soul. Like, why are you going to torture that person?
Well, it is harder the older you get, I will say, to
Yeah.
like try to think about getting back out there. I mean, I've been divorced for 4 years now, and I mean, I'm at a point where, I mean, I feel very happy. I'm very content in what is happening in my life, but I don't know that I can say that I'll want to get married again, because like I got out of the first one pretty unscathed. I mean, we're still friends, and for all intents and purposes, everyone's pretty well settled and
Yeah.
emotionally stable. And I just like feel like I might be tempting fate to do all of that again, and
Oh, I
like
think you should.
I don't know, but I mean, it's definitely harder the older you get. But and I can see not wanting to give up valuable time, but and what I meant by it's awesome is if you're able to really put in the work, because no one that you'll talk to that's being honest and you ask about marriage will say that it's not work,
Yeah,
right?
it's
It's the
another
first thing
human.
that they'll say. Like
Yeah.
it is a relationship that you're not, it's not always going to be glorious. You have to put in work to
Yeah.
keep it healthy, right? So if you're a couple that's been together for a long time and you feel that like the, sparkle is going, and you do the work to try to correct it, that's a beautiful thing. If you can make it last and you can evolve together and you can support each other, I think that that's great. I just think that it feels a little far-fetched for me that the person that I was 17 and, in high school, that it would make sense for us to be married now, because I'm not
Yeah.
the same person I was then. Right. So I don't know, like to each his own. And I mean, whatever works for,
Whatever works, but it's really good to have love and share
oh,
and
I love
share.
love.
Yeah,
Yes.
everybody
I love
loves
love.
love. Yeah.
Yes.
It'll come.
Well,
Love will come to you.
here's a final question for
Okay.
you.
Okay. Okay.
So, and it's kind of along the same lines, but if you could give one piece of advice
Hmm.
to your younger self
Hmm.
that would impact, your future self, what would it be? What do you know now that you wish you'd known then?
Um, I think, well, since this is about divorce and relationships, just that you shouldn't settle for anything less than what you deserve. There were times in my life, well, there was just that chunk of time in my life where I settled for something less than I deserved. And um, I never should have done that, because that's time of my life I could never get back. And it's not that I would take the time with that person, because even though it was awful, it was also beautiful. I mean, I stayed for a lot of reasons, but I deserved a lot better than that. And I should have had the strength and the power, the wisdom, whatever, to be like, hold up, I deserve something different. And if you're not going to give me that, then goodbye. So that would be my advice.
Well, good for you. I can see that in you. I think being in a healthy relationship is good for all of us. It's written all over your face. And I
Yeah.
think you had to go through that to get to where you are. So,
Yeah.
if nothing else, that's the beauty in that situation. But I appreciate you so much for like
Thank
spending this time
you.
with me and having this conversation. I knew you would have interesting perspectives. I mean, if I'm being honest, there were probably times in your younger years where I would have not guessed you would have even gotten married. I think
Yes.
you were very anti-establishment for a while. And so, to see you
Yeah.
so well-rounded, and I just think
Yeah.
you found the marriage that it makes sense for you, and your cute little family makes sense. And
Yeah.
so that's a really beautiful thing to watch. I appreciate you being so
Thank
candid.
you. I can't wait to listen to your other podcasts.
I know. We'll just get into more stuff, and I will try to pick apart all of my friends' lives in short
Yes.
order. So,
Yes.
well, I
Wonderful.
love you. Thank you for spending this time with me,
Okay.
and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye,
Bye,
babe.
benefits boss.
No, this one's make it make sense.
Make it make sense.
Yep.
Okay.
Bye,
Bye.
baby.